Destination Medicine is a joint project of the regional training hubs. This podcast series brings you medical students' accounts of their experience in applying to study medicine. Welcome to Destination Medicine. I'm Peter Letts. Nicholas Mott is living proof that you can study medicine in the outback while having a very fun, social, cultural and sporting life. A country boy from Bega on the New South Wales south coast, he's swapped surf and green hills for red dirt country. And he says studying in Broken Hill isn't just a social whirl, but gives him much wider professional experience than he'd ever get in a city setting. Nicholas starts by describing the start of his journey to Nicole Goodman.
Initially, when I was in high school, I planned on going into university in general. I thought I was going to do law up until about September of my year 12, and then realised when I was doing my applications, I put an application in for medicine, managed to get into the pre-med pathway to start off with. And that's changed how I approached my career.
Yeah. What tips can you give our audience about that application or selection process? And how many unis did you end up applying to?
In terms of the tips I could give, I definitely fell into going into the medical pathway. In terms of university, I guess ATAR isn't as big a thing as they make it out to be, especially if you're from a rural town. So the course I was in, I only got an ATAR of low 80s, and I was in the 95 plus ATAR course. So there's room to manoeuvre, even if you don't get the ATAR you think you did. In terms of applying for universities, I only really applied for University of Wollongong to start off with. I guess that was because I was already affiliated with them through high school. So I'd met them before, I'd been there for their activities. So it was the university I wanted to go to, and all my friends were going there as well. And then in terms of overall applying for medicine, so I started postgraduate, which means I had an undergraduate degree, so a bachelor degree before I went into medicine. So I applied for University of Sydney in Wollongong, and then as part of my application, you get to put in to 6 different unis, and I didn't put too much thought into which ones those were.
The interviews that form part of your application process, what do you remember about those and how did you prepare for them?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a weird year in terms of preparing for interviews. So I was in the COVID cohort. So we were the first ones to go through the sort of Zoom meeting process. And we just did a general panel interview. So there was sort of 3 interviewers that asked us about 5 questions over 15 minutes. So more of a standard interview panel rather than the MMI format they have at the moment. In terms of preparing for it, I did a lot of volunteering in my undergraduate degree. So as a part of that, you apply for roles, you interview for roles. So I had a bit of experience in that regard. And I was also lucky enough to have my parents who interviewed people for jobs and other things. So they did a bit of practice with me as well. And I guess in terms of preparing for an interview, it's about understanding your values and how you approach the questions and what your experience is, rather than just trying to answer it off the bat as well.
Mm. Overall, what was your experience like in applying for medicine? And do you have a key message to tell anyone considering taking medicine on board?
My overall experience of applying was that it is quite a daunting process. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it is very complex when you're looking at it from just if you're in high school or if you're thinking about transitioning careers, but it is a process you can follow through. In terms of my key messages, I'd say anyone really has a chance of getting into medicine. That's not necessarily about what your background is. So go to university of people from political backgrounds or teaching backgrounds. So you don't have to be like a top-end science student to be applying for medicine, and it's more that goes into it than just what your academic ability is. It's also about who you are as a person.
Really good to keep in mind. The University of Wollongong has an extended clinical placement program that's part of the medicine degree. You hinted at this a little earlier, but why did you choose Broken Hill to spend your 12 months?
So I didn't actually choose Broken Hill as my first choice. So I was looking at going more towards Lismore or Grafton, but I think the key thing to take out of that is I was really keen to do a rural placement, not a metropolitan or a regional placement. In terms of Broken Hill, the things that did attract it to me, and part of putting it in my application a bit further down, was the being able to integrate into a small community. It's a bit of an exciting placement, so not many people get to go out here. It's a very unique experience, and it came with some great experiences as well. So I spent time with the Royal Flying Doctor Service. I've spent a month living in Wilcannia with 500 other people. So very different experience to what I got living on the far south coast or further towards the central west.
Yeah. And what about socially? Any time spent outside the clinical setting? What did you get up to?
Broken Hill's a very busy town socially. I think it's probably the busiest place I've lived outside of maybe undergraduate uni. So whilst I'm here, we go to trivia every Tuesday, karaoke on a Wednesday. We catch up on the weekends at the footy or soccer. And then there's usually an event on every couple of weeks. So we've been to rodeos, to races. We did a big cultural festival last year, and there's always something going on, even if that's a trip down to Adelaide or Mildura.
Wow, that is busy. That's fun.
It's a very fun year.
But even prior to this placement in Broken Hill, you were committed to promoting rural medicine. You've mentioned that working rurally, studying rurally was really important to you. Tell us more about why that is.
I guess in terms of what rural medicine means to me, I think I'm quite attached to it, having grown up in a small community like Bega. We didn't have a lot of healthcare services, and I can see that reflecting back in terms of what we did actually have access to at the hospital, and also the mental health services we had as well. So I think having seen that lack of services, that's pushed me to want to work rurally. Other than that, my personal experience of growing up in a small town, I feel more comfortable in rural areas. It's easier for me to live there, and I do find it quite stressful going back to the city. So it's also a factor as well.
You have just finished your 12-month period in Broken Hill. How has this placement affected your thoughts on working rurally in the future? Is it still something you'd like to carry on doing?
I think this has sort of cemented the idea I'd like to work rurally. And I think the key thing I've seen in Broken Hill is the range of careers and pathways you can take on living in a rural community. So it's not as streamlined as in the more regional areas, where if you're a general practitioner, you do that 5 days a week. You have the opportunity here to be working as a GP in the ED, doing a bit of anaesthetics. So having more widespread career opportunities, a bit more variety. And I think that's what I sort of reflected I want to do. So chasing down those varied careers.
You are literally in the middle of moving to the next town. From a work perspective, where do you go from here? What are your plans moving forward?
Short-term plans. So I finished up my last block of sort of formal placement for my degree. So I have 3 6-week rotations and elective placements. So I'll head up to Darwin for a bit of intensive care, down to Wagga for some peds, and then back home for a bit of general medicine time just before I graduate. In terms of what I'm doing for internship and residency, so I'm looking at Newcastle or Darwin, and then long term, still haven't worked out my career pathways, but probably general practice or one of the critical care pathways.
Great. What do you think is one piece of advice that you wish you were given before starting your medical journey?
Probably take my time. I've always been pretty keen to sort of rush through things, get them done as quickly as possible. So yeah, take a minute, smell the roses, that sort of thing. Definitely would have benefited from being told that a bit earlier on in my life.
And Nick, lastly, what is it about medicine do you think that you could just never have prepared for?
The variety of people and stories you hear, it's really valuable to be able to be a part of people's lives and be part of the group of people looking after them. But it's also really valuable for me to hear about those stories that they're telling us about as well.
Nicholas Mott, a final year medical student studying at Broken Hill Hospital. This is Destination Medicine. Thanks for listening. Regional training hubs are supported by funding from the Australian Government under the Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program.